I blinked my eyes open, and the very first thing I saw was my sixth brother tossing peanuts one-handed into his open mouth. The men around the dinner table were laughing loud enough to rattle the dishes. Our little sister's always been so fragile, sixth brother drawled, leaning back against his chair. A lazy, careless grin tugged at his lips. Tomorrow, she's supposed to ride out beyond the city walls to see us off. Mark my words. She won't stay on that horse 5 fully, before she's complaining her thighs ache something terrible. Laughter rippled all around the table. That my seventh brother sat closest to my elbow. His name was Kale. He worked at peeling an orange, his movements slow and deliberate, never once lifting his gaze toward all the noise. Pay her no mind, Kale said, his tone even. Just toss her a few soft-spoken compliments. She'll come chasing right after us all on her own. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My fingers jerked. The silver chopstick I held clinked hard against the rim of my porcelain bowl. It was only a faint, tiny chime, yet it reverberated inside my chest, sharp and heavy. I dropped my gaze down toward my plate. Resting there sat a slice of candied lotus root, glistening under its thick sweet syrup. This had been my absolute favorite food. Back when I was 16 years old. That was the age I died in my past life. I had gone years without tasting it again. All because my third brother had glanced down at my dinner plate once and muttered, "How can you stand something so cloyingly sweet? Doesn't it sicken you?" After that comment, I never touched candied lotus root again. And it was never only that one dish. I gave up so many pieces of myself. I hated the bitter bite of cold winter air, so I learned to never admit I was freezing. Pain made me flinch, so I taught myself to bear every ache in silence. I adored bright, richly embroidered gowns, but when others mocked how gaudy I looked in them, I slowly filled my wardrobe with nothing but muted, plain-colored fabrics that I thought back to when I was small. Thunder would shake every window frame in the manor. I would wrap my quilt tight around my shoulders and run straight for Kale's bedroom. But once I turned 16, even when fever shook every bone in my body, I would never knock on anyone's door. I lived in constant fear of hearing those same cruel phrases over and over: fragile, spoiled, far too sensitive. That in my old life, right after this exact family supper, I'd let 6 brothers teasing get under my skin. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I'd flushed bright red, and stubbornly insisted I could handle riding out to see them depart the next morning. Kale had grown annoyed with my outburst. He pressed that freshly peeled orange into my palms, and told me to stop throwing a fit. So the next dawn, driven by this desperate need to prove I was not weak, I climbed onto a horse and rode all the way out of the capital to send my brothers off. The saddle rubbed the skin raw between my thighs. Blood seeped through my inner layers of clothing. Once I returned home to the estate, I said not a single word about my injuries. For 3 full days I burned with raging fever. My eldest brother pressed his palm to my burning forehead. His brows pulled tight. "How can you be so reckless with your own body?" he chided. Even so, I'd felt a spark of foolish happiness, because second brother had laughed and spoken one short line. "Well, at least she isn't so fragile anymore." That single sentence stuck with me for years. Whenever pain bit into me, I endured. Whenever exhaustion weighed me down, I forced myself to keep pushing forward. Whenever tears welled up behind my eyes, I first scanned every face around me. I had to check, was I allowed to cry? I carried that habit all the way until I turned 28. That winter had blanketed the whole capital in snow. Old wounds flared to life inside me. I lay trapped in my bed, every breath sharp and throbbing with pain. One by one, all 7 of my brothers came home. Kale, the youngest among them, sat right beside my bedside. His eyes were bloodshot, frightening to look at. He gripped my hand tightly in his. "Why didn't you tell us how much you were suffering long before this?" he'd asked. By that point, I no longer had enough strength left to answer. I just stared at him, and suddenly my mind jumped back 12 years. I'd fallen and scraped my knee raw. Back then, he'd laughed and said, "Why are you crying again?" Bit by bit, I had truly stopped crying altogether. And then, when my body was breaking apart, he wondered why I never confided in any of my brothers. How strange it felt. I had spent my entire lifetime molding myself into exactly the girl they wanted me to become. And in the end, that version of me still failed to win their full affection. Lila. Eldest brother's voice pulled me out of my swirling memories. I lifted my head. 7 young men sat circled around the dinner table. That eldest brother, Joran, was 27. Calm, steady, always in command. Second brother Rian was 25. A faint smile still playing across his lips. Third brother Torin sat rigid-backed in his seat. Fourth brother Kian tapped sixth brother's bowl playfully with his chopsticks. Fifth brother Elon sat quiet and still. Sixth brother Corin arched an eyebrow, right in my direction. And Kale still sat there, slowly peeling his orange. All of them were alive. And so was I. This was 3 days before they would leave the capital to complete their military rotation along the frontier borders. I was 16 once more. I had gotten a second chance. What's gotten into you? Kale held out that fully peeled orange toward my hands. Are you truly upset about something? In my past life, I would have taken the fruit. I would have sat there, burning with quiet hurt. I would have demanded to know whether he also believed I was nothing but a fragile, spoiled girl. This time, I glanced at the orange stretched out toward me. Then I reached across the table instead and picked up another slice of glistening candied lotus root. Sixth brother is right, I said plainly. The whole dining room fell quiet. Corin blinked hard, caught off guard. Wait, what? I bit down into the lotus root. Sweet flavor melted soft across my tongue. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and spoke again. I am fragile. I feel the cold deeply. Pain scares me. I hate riding horses. Tomorrow's going to be bitterly cold. So I will not come to see you all right out of the city. Kale's hand froze halfway, still holding that orange. Third brother Torin frowned. It's only 5 li of travel. Torin pointed out. I nodded. Which is exactly why I'm not going. Eldest brother Joran's gaze settled on me. We will have the grooms select a gentle-tempered horse for you tomorrow. You may ride at a slow pace. His tone was completely natural. It was the exact tone he had used countless times before. He had already made my decision for me. Without asking what I wanted, I lifted my eyes to meet his. Eldest brother. I told you. I am not coming. Now a genuine, heavy silence wrapped around the whole table. Even fourth brother Kian's smile faded away. Joran had almost certainly never heard me speak to him in such a firm, unyielding voice. His brows drew together. Yet he did not grow angry. If you are feeling unwell, you can travel by carriage instead, he offered. I do not wish to take a carriage either. Kale finally set the orange down on the table. Lila, what tantrum are you throwing now? Impatience colored every word. That familiar sharp edge I knew so well from my old life. Once upon a time, hearing that tone would send panic shooting through my chest. I would fear he had grown tired of me, scared he would stop caring for me entirely. Even right now, something inside my chest ached. But I offered no long-winded explanation. I dropped my head and kept eating my meal. This is no tantrum. I simply do not want to go. Kale stared at me for a long stretch of time. Then he leaned back against his chair. Fine. Go or don't go. It makes no difference to me. He paused a heartbeat, then added. Mark my words though. Once we ride off tomorrow morning, you will come running to catch up with us all the same. Laughter returned to the dinner table. I smiled along with everyone else. I did not argue against his prediction. 3 days rolled by. My 7 brothers were set to depart the capital. They rode out through the manor courtyard gates. Kale twisted around in his saddle, his eyes searching deliberately for me, truly not coming to wave us off. He called out. I stood under the sheltered covered walkway, a hand warmer tucked tight against my chest. The outdoor wind bit sharp and vicious. I buried my chin deeper into the thick fox fur trim of my cloak. It's far too cold out here, I answered. Kale's prepared reply died in his throat. Second brother Rian burst out laughing. There you go. That's exactly what being fragile looks like. In my past life, those words would have made my cheeks burn hot with shame. This time, I simply nodded. Yes, it is. Rian's laughter faded. Eldest brother Joran watched me for a long moment. Go back inside where it is warm. He told me. I gave a small nod. Safe travels, brothers. 7 horses thundered through the manor gates. In every previous departure, I had followed them all the way past the city walls. I would stand alone at the end of the long road. watching until every last one of their figures vanished over the horizon. Not this time. I watched for only a short while. Then I turned around and walked back into the house. My maid Chunda hurried along right behind me, her voice soft. "Miss, wouldn't you like to watch them ride a little longer?" "No." I told her that I headed straight for my private courtyard. I threw open my storage trunks and started folding my clothes to pack. Chunda's eyes went wide with surprise. "Miss, whatever are you doing?" "I'm going to stay at my maternal grandparents' estate." She just stared at me in total bewilderment. "But the young masters have only just ridden away." "Precisely," I replied. I carefully folded a pale red silk shawl and laid it on top of my traveling luggage. This had been one of my favorite garments when I was younger. Fourth brother once joked I looked like a brightly painted New Year festival doll whenever I wore it. After that joke, I never dared put it on again. Even now, I still thought it was stunningly beautiful. So it sat right on top of my things. Our father spent most of his time away from the estate. By pure chance, though, he was staying within the capital right then. I walked over to his study and told him I intended to spend some length of time staying with my mother's parents. He was reading over a letter. He lifted his gaze toward me. "Have you quarreled with your brothers?" "No, father." "Truly?" Father studied my face for a good long while. Then he let out a quiet sigh. "Very well. Go. After your mother passed away, you should have spent more time with her side of the family." I bowed low. "Thank you, father." By that same afternoon, every last belonging I needed was all packed away. Tucked at the very back of one drawer rested a half-finished wrist guard. I had begun stitching it for Kale. 2 years prior, he had injured his right wrist. On cold winter days, that old injury would throb and ache. In my past life, I'd embroidered every stitch with care and gifted it to him for his birthday. He'd grumbled that the cloud embroidery patterns looked too soft and feminine. Even so, he had worn that guard for many years afterward. I brushed my fingertips gently over those incomplete stitched clouds. In the end, I did not tuck it into my bags. I simply closed the drawer shut. The following day, my carriage rolled out from the Marquis Manor compound. Wheels rumbled over rough stone road. Chunda could not resist lifting the fabric curtain to glance backward. "Miss, you can still see our manor gates from here." I did not turn my head. Let the curtain fall. The heavy, towering red gates of the Marquis estate vanished from sight. I leaned back against soft carriage cushions, clutching my hand warmer tight. A quiet thought settled in my chest. It had not been nearly as hard as I expected to stop chasing after my brothers. My grandparents' Sioux family residence was not as grand and sprawling as the Marquis estate, but it hummed with a gentle, peaceful atmosphere. The moment my carriage rolled through their outer gates, grandmother was already waiting under the covered walkway, leaning on her wooden cane. The instant I stepped down out of the carriage, her brows drew tight. "Why are you wearing so little clothing?" I glanced down at myself. I wore a thick fox fur cloak, layered over a heavily padded winter dress. If this counted as insufficient layers, every person back at the Marquis Manor would have laughed themselves sick. Yet all at once, my nose stung. "Grandmother." I breathed. I ran forward and threw my arms around her. The force of my embrace made her stagger slightly. She lifted one hand and tapped the back of my head lightly. "How old are you now?" Still this clingy child. My whole body tensed up by instinct. I started to pull myself away. But then she spoke again. "What is wrong with being clingy? You clung far worse when you were small. Come inside. The wind is sharp out here." I pressed my lips together and followed her indoors. That evening, the Sioux family dining room was heated by floor-running warmth. The air was perfectly comfortable. Still, my hands and feet naturally ran cold. Even after I finished a full bowl of soup, my fingertips remained icy. Grandmother noticed me curling my hands inward against my body to fight the chill. The words, "I am not cold," sat already on the tip of my tongue. I bit them back. After a long pause, I spoke honestly. "I am a little cold." Grandmother never even lifted her eyes from her bowl. "Bring another charcoal brazier over," she ordered. The senior maid beside her responded at once. Soon servants carried a small burning charcoal stove into the room. That nobody laughed. Nobody questioned how I could still feel cold in such a warm space. Not a single person stared. Adding heat for someone feeling chilled felt like the most ordinary thing in the whole world that I sat there, staring at the glowing red embers for a very long time. Grandfather tapped his knuckles against the wooden table to pull me back to the present. Staring at charcoal will not fill your stomach, child. I shook myself out of my thoughts, bowed my head and drank my soup. But my eyes burned, thick with unshed tears that my grandparents doted on me, yes. But they would not let me sit idle and spoiled that the next morning. I slept late. When I finally got up, grandmother sat out in the courtyard sorting through household account books. Hardly had I sat down beside her, when she ordered servants to bring 3 large wooden boxes forward. What are these? I asked. The jewelry you brought with you. Count every piece yourself. I blinked. Could Chunda not do that for me? Her hands belong to her. These possessions belong to you. Grandmother gave me a firm look. You ought to know exactly what you own. It is one thing for us to spoil you. Do not imagine you have come here merely to eat, sleep, and laze your days away. I laughed softly. I understand. She huffed. And one more thing. Yesterday you promised your grandfather you would help tidy his study. Go do that this afternoon. Being fragile does not release you from keeping your word. I froze for a heartbeat, then laughed harder. Very well. That was the very first time I had ever heard someone say the word fragile without scorn, without judgment. It was spoken as plainly as if she had told me I felt cold. While still reminding me to keep my promises. In that moment, clarity washed over me. Being fragile and being useless had never meant the exact same thing. Behind grandfather's study lay a neglected little garden. For years no one had tended to it. Dead vines crawled all over the stone walls. Several old plum trees leaned crookedly to one side. Right at the garden's center stood a camellia tree. Its trunk was thick and ancient, yet the whole plant looked sickly and weak. I paused at the garden entrance. Something soft stirred deep inside my heart. Was this my mother's garden? Grandfather stepped up beside me. Yes. Before she married your father, she tended this spot constantly. After your mother passed away, your grandmother could not bear to come out here. Little by little, it fell into ruin. I stepped into the garden. Dry dead leaves crunched under my shoes. I remembered this place from my earliest childhood, when mother was still alive. She would bring me here, sit me down on a stone bench, and tuck soft camellia blossoms into my hair. In my past life, I had forced myself not to think of mother for many years. Every memory of her brought tears, and crying meant you were fragile. That now I stood within her long-abandoned garden, and tears began to roll down my cheeks of their own accord. That grandfather saw me crying. He did not tell me to hold back my tears. He simply pointed toward that old camellia tree. That your mother loved that tree above all others. Sadly, it grows weaker year after year. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve. I want to bring this garden back to life. Grandfather looked at me. Do you know how to tend plants? In my old life, I had learned many skills my brothers valued highly, all to win their approval. Horse riding, archery, reading military maps. Yet I had never excelled at any of them. Ironically, mother had taught me about flowers, plants, and incense materials when I was small. I had quietly studied those crafts for years, though I never dared speak of them openly. Third brother once scoffed, "What good future comes from fussing over flowers and grass?" Grandfather simply nodded. Then give it a try. He never asked whether this work would serve some practical purpose. He never said a young lady ought not concern herself with garden labor. A light, long-forgotten feeling of freedom welled up inside my chest at that very afternoon. I grabbed a pair of pruning shears and set to work. The camellia was choked full of dead branches. I worked carefully. Just as I prepared to snip 2 more dead twigs, a man's voice drifted over from the other side of the garden wall. "If you keep cutting like that, you might as well dig the whole tree up come spring." I jumped. My pruning shears nearly slipped out of my grasp. "Who is there?" Silence hung for a moment. Then half a figure appeared above the top of the wall. A young man dressed in soft blue-green robes. His features were quiet, refined. One hand rested lightly on the wall surface. He glanced first at the shears in my hands, then over at the ailing camellia. Me? I frowned. "Who are you?" "Peregrine Jincheng, second son to the Earl of Yunging." I knew that name. The Earl's second son. He had injured his leg when he was still a boy. Unlike his father and elder brother, he never took up a military career. Many people across the capital called it a terrible waste of potential. Right then, only one question occupied my thoughts. Why are you perched on my grandfather's wall? He glanced down. This wall divides both family estates. I am standing on a ladder on my own family's side. I fell quiet. Fair enough. I turned my gaze back toward the camellia tree. What did you mean by what you said just now? The problem is not all these dead branches. Its roots have sustained damage. If you cut away too many outer branches all at once, you will only weaken the tree further. His tone stayed completely calm. That I was not fully convinced. How would you know that? I have managed the flower nurseries next door for several years now. I have seen many trees in this exact condition. He did not climb over the wall, snatch my shears out of my hands, or push me aside so he could complete the work himself. He simply pointed. Keep that branch intact. Cut the far left branch right at its third joint. Loosen the soil around its roots. Do not pour too much water on it. I could not help asking. And if I choose not to follow your advice? Peregrine glanced over toward me. It is your tree. Whether you prune it is entirely your choice. With that, he left. I stood there alone, shears still raised in my hands for a long time. All the men I had known growing up tended to repeat the same pattern. Listen to me. My eldest brother said it. Every one of my other brothers said it. Even my father on occasion. Male cousins too would remark. Girls understand nothing of this. Let me handle this for you. This was the first time I had met a man who could clearly see I was making a mistake, yet would not take the tool straight out of my grasp. In the end, I followed Peregrine's guidance. Not because I had to obey him, but because after careful thought, I could see his reasoning made solid sense. That evening, a letter arrived from the Marquis Manor. Chunda brought the folded sheet over to me. Miss, this comes from 7th young master. I broke the seal. There was only one short line written across the page. I hear you have truly moved to your maternal grandparents' home. I stared down at those words. I could easily picture Cale's expression as he wrote this. Surprise. Disbelief. Maybe a flicker of displeasure. In my past life, I would have immediately scribbled a 10-page reply. I would explain I was not angry. I would say I only wished to spend time with grandmother. I would reassure him he was still my favorite brother. This time, I folded the paper neatly and placed it inside a storage box. Chunda blinked. Miss, are you not going to write a reply? Tomorrow. What will you write to him? I thought it over. Simply reply with one word, Chunda just stared at me in astonishment. I smiled. That night, I lay buried under soft quilts at my grandparents' home. Charcoal burned warm in the brazier. Outside the window, the season's first snow drifted down from the sky. I slept soundly. I did not lie awake, missing my brothers. By my 10th day living within the Sioux residence, that struggling camellia tree sprouted a tiny new bud. It was barely bigger than my fingernail. I knelt beside the tree trunk and stared at it for ages. I was so happy I could not stop smiling all morning. Grandfather walked past. It lives. That boy Jincheng really does know a thing or two about plants. I lifted my head. You know him. I have watched him grow up. After he hurt his leg in childhood, everyone kept murmuring about what a great pity it was. He paid them little mind. Set up several flower nurseries all on his own. Lost quite a lot of money those first 2 years. Now they finally turn a modest profit. I thought of Peregrine's quiet, composed face. I would never have guessed that story. That boy hides things well, grandfather said with a hint of disdain. Even when something hurts him, he will rarely speak of it. On damp, rainy days, that old leg injury still plagues him. His bones took terrible damage when he was young. I asked no further questions. That afternoon, Peregrine Jincheng walked straight through our front gate. No more perching on walls. He brought grandfather a shipment of rare orchid plants. Passing the garden, he spotted the camellia tree and paused. It has sprouted new life. I lifted my chin on purpose. I saved it. He nodded. This tree has a powerful will to survive. I glared over at him. What exactly is that supposed to mean? I was complimenting the tree, he said. His expression completely earnest, I could not hold back my laughter. Peregrine looked toward me. You look far more pleasant when you smile than when you frown. I hesitated for a second, but he was already shifting topics. Old Master Su tells me you want to restore this garden. Fill it with plants that bloom through all 4 seasons. You know a little about incense making, yes? And raw incense materials. I know a little bit. Peregrine fell quiet. Let us hope those 2 a little bits are not the same a little bit that nearly killed your camellia tree. I grew indignant and lifted my small garden shovel toward him. He stepped hastily backward. Careful. That shovel costs good silver. That only made me angrier. Even so, genuine laughter bubbled up out of me. That was how Peregrine and I grew familiar with each other. He never showered me with empty flattery. When I made mistakes, he would say so plainly. When he himself was wrong, he would admit that as well. Most important of all, he never made choices on my behalf. We planned a trip out to one of his flower nurseries. The Su household had prepared a horse for me. I stood at the bottom of the stone steps, and my eyes landed on the saddle. A phantom pain flared between my thighs. I could almost feel the raw, bleeding soreness from that terrible long-ago ride in my 16th year. I froze solid. Peregrine had been speaking to the nursery steward. He turned, noticed I had not moved an inch, and walked over toward me. What is wrong? Nothing. The answer spilled out automatically. Then I startled myself. Those 3 words, nothing. It does not hurt. I can manage, had been my constant mantra in my past life. I pressed my lips tight together and tried again. I do not wish to ride a horse. Peregrine glanced at the horse. Very well. We will take the carriage instead. He never demanded an explanation. He never pointed out how short the journey was. He simply turned and told servants to ready the carriage. I stayed standing right where I was. Do you not think this is troublesome? He looked back over his shoulder. The carriage belongs to the nursery. The horse also belongs to the nursery. Where is the trouble? It will add only a quarter hour to our travel time. How does that inconvenience you? I had no reply to give. He looked at me like he found my reaction strange. If you do not wish to ride in the carriage either, we do not have to go at all. The nursery will not vanish. I want to go, I said quickly. I truly do. Peregrine nodded. Then climb aboard. I sat quiet for the whole ride. Open farmland rolled past the carriage window. Wind stirred the fabric curtain. A thought settled gently inside my mind. I did not need to list endless reasons for not wanting to ride. Simply not wanting to was reason enough. Letters kept arriving, one after another, sent from my 7 brothers. Eldest brother's letter was exactly what I expected. Stay with your grandparents for a few days, then return home. There are many household matters waiting for you. I wrote back. I will not return right now. I am happy living here. Second brother wrote next. Where are those honey-preserved plums you make every year? I have finished all the jars you sent along on our travels. In years gone by, I would carefully prepare 7 separate bundles of travel treats. I remembered every small preference. Which brother feared cold, which hated bitter medicine, which snacks each one loved. I recalled their tastes better than they remembered them themselves. This time I had prepared nothing. Reading Rian's question, my hand instinctively reached for the written recipe resting on my desk. Then I pulled my hand back. My reply read. Ask the traveling cooks to prepare them for you. Sixth brother's note was far more blunt. You are not still angry because I called you fragile, are you? I stared at those words for a long time. My reply was short. I am not angry. Kale sent the highest volume of letters. First note. Have you truly left home? Second. What is so wonderful about living with your grandparents? Third. When will you come back? Fourth. Lila, are you deliberately refusing to answer my letters? I lined all 4 letters neatly across my desk. Chunda fought hard to hold back her giggles. Seventh young master is growing anxious. I wanted to laugh too, yet a faint sour ache lingered deep in my heart. When we were small, Kale had always been my favorite brother. He was only 2 years older than I. Mother died when I was 7. One storm-racked night, the whole household was busy. I hid under my quilt and cried. 9-year-old Kale crept secretly into my bedchamber. He feared thunder too, yet he patted my back and whispered, "Your big brother is here." As we grew older, He began to see my attachment as clingy. But whenever he offered me a little gentle coaxing, I would always come back to him. So when he had said I would go running after them all by myself, it had not been pure cruelty. It had been certainty. He was far too sure I would always be there for him. This time, I sent no reply to that fourth letter. 2 days later, a fifth letter arrived. The demanding tone was gone. Only one single sentence remained. What have you been occupying yourself with lately? I stared at the paper. At last, I picked up my writing brush. I wrote 2 words. Growing flowers. The next day, second brother sent a letter for the first time in a while. He asked nothing of preserved plums. Instead he wrote, I saw a bright red flower alongside the road today. I do not know its name. If you were here, you would almost certainly know that I showed this letter to Peregrine. He skimmed over the lines. Does your brother believe flowers are some terribly difficult puzzle? They seem to think I am the difficult one, I told him. Peregrine lifted his gaze toward me. I hurried to add, that was only a joke. He did not laugh. He lowered his eyes and kept sorting flower pots. After a short pause he spoke. Then be difficult to raise. I blinked. What? Camellias are difficult to raise as well. That is why they look so beautiful once they finally bloom. I stared at him. His expression stayed completely calm. Do not misunderstand. I was speaking of the flowers. I suddenly felt like laughing. Peregrine Jincheng, you are a terrible liar. At that, the very corner of his mouth lifted into a faint smile. That when I returned to my quarters that day, a letter from eldest brother waited for me. Only a handful of lines. The final line read, Lila, are you angry with us? I held that letter in both hands. For the first time, I did not rush to deny it. I suddenly understood. Perhaps I had been angry. The old version of myself had been far too afraid to allow anger to live inside me. I feared if I stayed upset for too long, my brothers would stop wanting me around. But now I was allowed to hold real feelings. I did not need to offer instant forgiveness. I folded the letter, set it beneath my lamp, and waited until the next morning to compose my answer to eldest brother. I am not trying to punish anyone. I simply wish to keep living with my maternal grandparents. Once those words were written down, an unexpected lightness settled over my whole chest. When you start living life for yourself, time moves swiftly. 1 month passed since I came to the Sioux residence. The camellia tree was covered all over in fresh young leaves. 2 months in, I attempted to recreate Mother's springtime incense formula from her old handwritten notes. I failed spectacularly. The moment incense powder caught flame, thick acrid bitter smoke filled the entire room. I clamped a hand over my nose and fled outdoors. Peregrine happened to stand right by the doorway. That smoke drove him 2 steps backward. Are you trying to brew poison? Be quiet. My face burned hot. It was merely one failed attempt. He nodded. I can see that. My mind agreed with his words. My heart did not. In my past life, failure terrified me. Whenever I messed something up, one thought would immediately surface. See, my brothers were right. I am useless. I picked up the charred lump of incense, intending to toss it away in secret. Peregrine stretched out his hand toward me. Give that to me. What for? Keep it. Why keep something that failed? So when you finally succeed later, you can pull this out and look back on it. His voice stayed soft. At least you will remember you were not brilliant from the very start. I shot him a sharp look. How can you be certain I will ever become good at this? Peregrine considered for a moment. It is equally possible you will remain terrible forever. I fell silent. Then he laughed gently. A failure is only a failure. It does not mean something is fundamentally wrong with you. I stood there for a long stretch of time. Then I placed that blackened incense lump safely inside a box. Instead of throwing it away. By my 3rd month at the Sioux estate, I could tend a full small plot of plants all by myself. My incense-making formula still needed refinement, but at least the smoke no longer carried that harsh bitter tang. My days stayed full and busy. One day, Chunda brought fabric and thread meant for knee warmers. Seeing those materials, a memory hit me. I had originally planned to sew a new set for second brother that year. Years before, his knees had suffered from cold. Damp winter weather always troubled his joints. Cloth and thread were already laid out. Without thinking, I threaded my needle. The sharp tip pricked down into the fabric. And then I stopped. Year after year in my past life, I had sewn these knee warmers for him. Time and again, Rian accepted them as if receiving them was his natural right. Once he even grumbled that the color I had chosen was ugly. But he was 25 years old. He owned servants, stewards, plenty of silver. Did he truly need hand-sewn knee warmers from me? Chunda tilted her head. Miss, why have you stopped? I pulled my needle free of the cloth. Put these supplies away. You will not make them for second young master? No. Chunda stared carefully at my face. Are you still upset with him? I shook my head. No, I had slowly come to understand. So many of the things I used to do for my brothers were not things they truly needed from me. I did them only because I burned with a desperate urge to prove I was useful. If I stopped, the world would not fall apart. Second brother would not freeze. They could live their own separate lives, and so could I. Over those 3 months, the tone of my brother's letters shifted gradually. Eldest brother's change was the clearest. Where he once wrote "come home" after a short stay, he now wrote, "If you enjoy living with the Sioux family, you may remain there longer." Second brother stopped begging for preserved plums. Instead he wrote, "I spotted a red flower by the roadside today. I cannot name it. You would probably know." Fifth brother rarely wrote letters. Yet one note came from him, asking simply, "Is your camellia tree still alive?" Sixth brother even wrote, "I shall not compare you to Mingu anymore. Otherwise you will hold a grudge." Reading those words, I rolled my eyes. Kale changed more than anyone else. For that first month, he sent letter after letter, demanding I return home immediately. In month 2, he began asking what sorts of things filled my days. In month 3, one of his letters contained only these lines. "Back when I said you would come running after us all by yourself, I spoke without thinking." I stared at that page for ages. Isin no rapli. I understood he had spoken carelessly. Yet the words that hurt most in life were so often the ones spoken without any real thought behind them. Exactly 3 months to the day after I moved into my grandparents' household, I sat within the incense mixing room, testing out a new blend of ingredients. A gate servant rushed abruptly inside. "Miss." I did not lift my head. "What has happened?" "The young masters of the Shan household have returned to the capital." My incense spoon froze in my hand. My heart seemed to skip a beat. Chunda's whole face lit up. "All 7 of them?" "All 7, the servant gasped for breath. "And they are all crowding right outside our front gate this very moment." I stared at him. My metal spoon slipped, clattering down into the ceramic bowl. Peregrine had been sitting across the room, writing down notes about flower materials. He lifted his head. 7 brothers? Yes. He looked over toward me. "You are going out to meet them?" Nervousness washed over me, like I had stepped back into old times. But that was not who I was any longer. Peregrine closed his account book. "If you do not wish to face them, you do not have to." I drew in a deep breath and stood upright. "I will go see them. Not out of fear they might grow angry. I genuinely wish to see them. 3 months have passed. I have missed them too. Becoming independent does not mean I must lie about that." As I walked toward the front courtyard, fourth brother's voice drifted to my ears from far away. "I told everyone climbing the wall would get us here faster. None of you listened." Eldest brother's cold reply followed right after. "Go ahead and try it." I paused in my steps, then kept walking forward. There stood all 7 brothers, not one missing. They filled up the whole entrance to my grandparents' home. Travel dust still clung to their clothes. They had not even gone back to their own manor to change their outfits. Kale spotted me first. His whole expression shifted. He opened his mouth. He looked ready to scold me or laugh. In the end, no words came out. He strode quickly toward me. "Lila." He moved so fast he nearly tripped over the threshold. I stood under the sheltered walkway watching him. 3 months apart had left him darker skinned, thinner. Road dust dusted his cuffs. He was only 18 years old. Yet right now, he looked as if he had truly endured hardship out beyond the manor walls. My heart softened instantly. I almost blurted out, "7th brother, how is it you have grown so thin?" But the very first words out of his mouth were, "So you finally decide to come out and face us?" Half of that soft feeling inside me vanished. I looked straight back at him. This is my grandparents' home. Naturally, I am allowed to step outside. Cale choked on his own words. Second brother could not hold back his laughter. Serves you right. Cale shot a glare over his shoulder. Be quiet. He turned his gaze back toward me. His eyes looked strangely red. What is wrong with you? What do you mean? 3 whole months. You truly never once came back to the Marquis estate. I spoke calmly. I sent you letters. I told you I was doing well. Who asked whether you were doing well? He grew agitated. I want to know why you would not come home. This place is where I choose to live right now. What of the Marquis Manor? That is also your home. If it is truly home, then why? He cut himself off mid-sentence. He must have realized there was no satisfying way to finish that thought. At last, he forced the words out. Little sister, who gave you permission to stop wanting your brothers? Complete silence fell over the gateway. Even the servants secretly watching from off to the side lowered their heads. I froze too. Hearing that sentence spoken out loud, a line that might sound triumphant inside a story, brought me no victory. Only sharp pain. Once, when thunder boomed in the night, he had sat beside me and said, "Do not fear. Your brother is here." Later he had said, "Coax her a small amount and she will run back to us." And now he said, "Who gave you permission to stop wanting your brothers?" I lifted my eyes to meet his. "I never said I did not want you," Cale answered at once. "Then come home with me." I said nothing. Eldest brother had already turned toward the household coachman. "Bring the carriage around. She has many belongings. Send servants inside to pack everything." Eldest brother. I cut through his words. He spun around toward me. "What is it? What are you doing?" His brows drew together. "Taking you home." I never said I would go. All 7 brothers fell completely silent. This was no dramatic theatrical hush. They were genuinely stunned. Eldest brother had clearly assumed I had merely been sulking for these 3 months. He expected that once they returned to the capital, I would simply follow them home. Second brother held a paper bag filled with my favorite sweets. Fourth brother had joked along the journey about settling scores with me once I returned. Fifth brother even carried my pet cat in his arms. The second that cat spotted me, it began meowing loudly. My heart almost melted. Even so, I would not change my mind. Eldest brother was quiet for a moment. "How much longer do you intend to stay here?" "I do not know." Cale exploded immediately. "What do you mean you do not know?" "I mean exactly that. I do not know. Are you still angry with us?" "I am not." "If you are not angry, then why?" "Seventh brother." He fell still. "You said it yourself. You told everyone to pay me no mind. You said a little coaxing would make me run after you all by myself." Cale's expression shifted. "I only spoke in jest." "I know," I nodded. "You spoke without thinking. But I heard every word. So this time I did not run after you." Cale opened his mouth. No sound came out. His eyes grew even redder. My heart ached for him too. But unlike my past life, I did not rush to say, "Forget it, I forgive you." As I had been hurt. Those wounds were real. Second brother stepped forward and held out the paper bag of sweets. "These are for you. Your favorites." I accepted the bag. "Thank you, second brother." He visibly relaxed. "Then let us head home." "I will take the sweets," I smiled gently. "That does not mean I am returning with you." Second brother's face went utterly blank. Fourth brother burst out laughing. Second brother, looks like you wasted your silver." I glanced toward fourth brother. "All of you rushed all the way here, without even stopping at your own manor." Fourth brother spread his hands. "Word reached the capital that you were still staying with the Sioux family. We rode straight over, never even dismounting our horses." Cale's cheeks flushed bright with embarrassment, but I could not help laughing. Cale caught me smiling and froze. "You are clearly happy." "I am happy to see all of you," I answered openly. "You missed us?" "Yes." His face brightened instantly. Then I added my next line. "But I still do not wish to go back to the Marquis estate." His whole face collapsed all over again. I almost laughed aloud. Eldest brother had watched our whole exchange from start to finish. At last he spoke. "When do you plan to return home?" I thought carefully. In times past, I always gave people definite answers. I feared leaving uncertainty would make others anxious. For the very first time, I told the truth. I truly do not know. Something shifted deep within eldest brother's brows. Yet he did not press me further. He simply nodded, very well. Kale spun toward him. Eldest brother. She says she does not know, Joran said. Then we wait until she decides. Kale stared at him in disbelief. What else would you have me do? Eldest brother shot back. Tie her up and carry her home. Kale clamped his mouth shut. At that moment, grandmother finally stepped out from the main building. She leaned heavily on her cane, sweeping her gaze across 7 tall young men blocking her front doorway. Why are all of you standing here? The Sioux household is not collecting door god statues today. Fourth brother grinned first. Grandmother, do not try to charm us. She snorted. If you wish to see Lila you may. But there are rules. The 7 brothers exchanged glances. I had a sudden bad feeling. Grandmother lifted one hand into the air. First rule. Do not enter her private courtyard without asking permission. Second. Never call her fragile little thing or anything of that sort. Anyone who breaks this rule gets thrown out of this house. Third. Stop making decisions for her without her consent. And the final rule. She looked straight directly at Kale. When Lila says no, she means no. Kale's face turned green. Grandmother ignored his reaction. She turned to walk away. If you want to eat dinner, come inside. If not, go back to your own home. The 7 brothers traded looks. Then eldest brother stepped over the threshold first. The remaining 6 followed right behind him. I stood off to one side, and suddenly wanted to laugh. For the first time in my whole life, my 7 brothers needed to obey rules before they were allowed to walk through a doorway. That feeling was surprisingly wonderful. From the moment my brothers arrived, peace vanished from the Sioux residence. On their first day here, second brother showed up with sweets. He sat down and began to speak. Did you not always love? He caught himself mid-sentence and stopped. His mouth twitched. Do you still like these? I looked down at the box of pine nut candy. In my past life, I had eaten so much sweet food, then given up sweets for years. Even now that I allowed myself treats again, my tastes had shifted to not so much anymore. Second brother stiffened. How can that be? You loved them before. I did. Now I do not. He stared at the candy box as if it had betrayed him. After a long pause, he managed to ask, very well. What do you like then? I thought for a moment. Osmanthus cakes. The kind that are not overly sweet. He nodded. The very next day, 3 boxes of osmanthus cakes arrived. Each box held a different level of sweetness, that I could not stop smiling. He insisted stubbornly. Do not read too deeply into this. I merely happened to pass by that bakery. That bakery lies 2 streets in the opposite direction from this estate. I pointed out that silence hung in the air. Second brother, be quiet. On the 3rd day, fourth brother tried climbing the wall. His reasoning was simple. Walking all the way around to the front gate felt like far too much trouble. Grandmother's rule forbade unannounced entry into my courtyard. Fourth brother trusted his light-footed warrior skills, so he scaled the west wall. The instant he landed on our side of the wall, he ran straight into our grandfather's giant white domestic goose. That goose looked gentle most of the time. Once it set out chasing someone, it turned into a little demon. Fourth brother sprinted across the whole courtyard, that goose snapping at his calves. By the time I came outside, his feet slipped and he tumbled straight into the garden pond. The spring pond water was shallow, yet bitterly cold. He stood up soaked from head to toe. His face burned with rage. I clung to a stone pillar, laughing so hard I could barely stay upright. Lila, are you laughing at me? Fourth brother shouted. I laughed harder. Why should I not? He opened his mouth, then bit back whatever retort he planned. His mouth twitched. At last he spoke in a sour tone. I am fragile. You are forbidden to laugh at me. I froze, then laughed until tears streamed down my face. Fourth brother climbed out of the pond, and started laughing as well. How is grandfather's goose still alive? From far away, grandfather's voice boomed. That goose will still outlive you. The whole courtyard erupted with laughter. This laughter felt so different. In old times, whenever everyone laughed at me, I would force myself to laugh too. Yet my chest would feel tight and heavy. This time there was no weight. I simply thought fourth brother falling into the pond was hilarious. I cherished that light, easy feeling. Fifth brother was the quietest of all. After returning my cat to me, he would sit in silence for hours at a time. The cat curled upon my lap, purring loudly as I stroked its fur. "You are not going back to the Marquis estate?" he asked, but he shook his head. "I will sit for a while longer. Is something weighing on your mind?" He pulled a small wooden box from within his sleeve and placed it on the table. I opened the lid. Inside lay bookmarks. Carved wood, bamboo, one's press full of dried flowers. I stared at him in confusion. "Why are you giving these to me?" Fifth brother stayed quiet for a short moment. "A few days ago I was tidying my study. I realized over all these years every broken bookmark in my books had been quietly replaced by you. Whenever one wore out, you would provide a new one. I never asked you to. I never even noticed." His lips pressed together tightly. "I realize now I have never truly understood what you like." Those soft words stung my nose more deeply than any grand dramatic apology ever could. Fifth brother had never been the one hurting me most. He had simply grown used to my existence. Used to me remembering small details. Used to me giving, used to me always being present. "I love flowers," I told him. "I enjoy incense making. And I adore beautiful clothing." Fifth brother nodded very seriously. "I shall remember that." And later on he truly did. But that would happen much further down the line. Kale proved the hardest of my brothers to adjust. He broke grandmother's first rule 3 separate times. The very first time, he charged straight into my private courtyard without calling for permission. Grandmother sent servants to march him back out. The second time, he sat secretly outside my bedchamber door waiting for me. Grandmother found him once more and chased him away. By the third attempt, he finally learned to ask, "May I come inside?" I answered deliberately. No, his face turned rigid. "Why not?" "I am changing my clothes." "Oh." He immediately stepped 3 paces backward. "I will wait out here then." Behind my closed door, I laughed quietly. Something dawned on me. When I said no to him, he did not vanish from my life entirely. That afternoon, Peregrine and I set off for the flower nursery. This was the first occasion all 7 of my brothers met him in person. The atmosphere turned tense in an instant. Eldest brother looked him over from head to toe. Second brother's gaze drifted toward his injured leg. Fourth brother studied his face. Kale was the most direct. "Who are you?" Peregrine bowed politely. "Peregrine Jincheng." Kale frowned. "What business do you have spending time with my sister?" Peregrine glanced over toward me. "Are we still heading out to the nursery today?" "Yes, we are." "Then let us depart." He gave Kale no reply whatsoever. Kale nearly choked in shock. "Hey!" Second brother grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? He has stolen nothing from you." Kale's expression darkened further. "Is she some object that can be stolen away?" I spoke lazily. "Well, that is the first sensible thing seventh brother has said all day." Everyone laughed. Kale shot me a glare, yet he held his temper and checked it just before I climbed into the carriage. Second brother noticed the cold wind and blurted out, "It is freezing out here, why are you still?" Eldest brother lifted one hand, cutting him off. I had already pulled my thickest cloak tight and held my hand warmer firmly. The eldest brother's eyes rested on me. "Return home early tonight." That sentence still carried a faint hint of an order, but after a short pause he added, "If you wish to." I smiled. "I understand." Our carriage rolled down the lane. Peregrine sat across from me. After a moment he spoke, "You have quite a large number of brothers." "Ahem. They are very noisy." I tried hard to hold it back, but I burst out laughing. For half a month, all 7 brothers came to visit nearly every single day. Eventually grandmother tired of their constant comings and goings. She ordered all 7 of them to stay for one full dinner together. Better than having them troop in one after another and wear down my threshold. Fourth brother spoke up at once. "Grandmother, I climbed over your wall." Grandmother smiled coldly. "Next time I shall assign that goose to stand wall guard duty." Fourth brother fell silent. Dinner went smoothly for a good while. Mid-meal, fourth brother suddenly said, "Do you all remember when Lila was small?" He stopped short. "What?" I asked. "I do not wish to hear embarrassing childhood stories about me." Fourth brother blinked. In old times, if I had said those words, he would have laughed and teased. "What is wrong? We are family, we are only joking." Everyone else would tell me not to be petty. Now fourth brother watched my face for a moment, then swallowed the rest of his story. "Very well. I will not bring it up." I was caught off guard. He placed a piece of fish into my bowl. "Quit staring at me. Is there a flower growing out of my face?" "No." "Then eat your meal." I lowered my head. All of a sudden I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because this change felt so simple. I said I disliked something and he stopped. Why had I never dared to speak my honest feelings seriously in my past life? Once dinner was over, second brother did not leave at once. He waited for me under the covered corridor. I walked over, my cat held securely in my arms. "What is it you want?" For once, second brother wore no easy grin. "I need to tell you something." "Speak." He stared down toward the ground. "When you would cry as a child, I would always say, 'You are crying again.' I said nothing. When you were very small, I was not like that. When you fell down, I would pick you up. But as you grew older, I could hardly keep carrying you and comforting you every time something upset you." I lifted an eyebrow. "So you chose to mock me instead?" His ears turned faintly red. "I did not know how else to soothe you. I thought gentle teasing might make you feel better." I looked straight at him. I hated those words. Second brother lifted his head quickly. I did not say it was fine. I did not brush off his behavior by saying he meant no harm. I kept speaking. Sometimes I truly was in pain. But once you said you are crying again, I became afraid to shed tears at all. His lips moved. After a long pause he whispered, "I am sorry." That was the very first time he had offered me such a sincere apology. My chest ached. Yet I did not rush to smile and forgive him immediately. I simply nodded. "I heard you." Second brother clearly waited for me to offer full forgiveness. I did not give it. In the end, he would not pressure me. He only sat beside me for a little longer. "I will never say those words again." "Good. Please do not cry." I looked up. He panicked. "No, that is not." At last I laughed. "Second brother, you are truly terrible at comforting people." He laughed too. "I intend to learn." After that conversation, that sharp thorn sitting inside my heart regarding second brother slowly softened at what surprised me most. My brothers were not magically transformed into perfect people overnight. Eldest brother still retained that old habit of arranging things for others. Third brother would still occasionally say, "Just endure a little longer." Sixth brother still made thoughtless comparisons between people. When Kale grew impatient, he would start to say, "Why are you so?" and cut the word fragile off halfway. They had not turned into flawless brothers all at once. Oddly enough, that reality reassured me. Real change always moved slowly. Peregrine came to visit frequently throughout this period. The more my brothers saw of him, the less fond they grew of him. One evening after I had worked from dawn till dusk, Kale wished to come see me. I was completely worn out. Peregrine noticed my exhaustion. "Will you meet with him tomorrow?" "I do not want to." Then out of old habit I almost added, "But he might be upset." "If you do not wish to," Peregrine cut in, "do not go. Seventh young master will not perish if he does not see you today." I shot him a look. "Who talks like that?" "It is only the truth. Aren't you afraid of my 7 brothers?" "Why should I fear them? There are 7 of them, not 70. I laughed until my sides ached. "You laugh far more freely now than when you first arrived here," he observed. I paused. "Doi." "Yes. Before, every time you refused another person's request, you looked as if you owed them 100 silver taels. Now you only look as if you owe 10. I struck him lightly with my folding fan. He dodged away, a faint smile playing across his face. In that moment, I understood my feelings for him. I enjoyed being with him, not because he always agreed with everything I said, but beside him, I never needed to perform the role of a sensible, easygoing young lady. Around Qingming festival time, Mingu got hurt. Several younger members of our extended family arranged a horse riding outing outside the capital. I traveled there by carriage. Sixth brother watched me climb down. His lips twitched. He had obviously wanted to tease me. In the end, he held his tongue. He only asked, "Are you cold?" I answered honestly, "Yes." He tossed his heavy outer cloak toward me. "Put this on." "Aren't you going to feel cold?" "My skin is thick," he joked. I laughed and accepted the cloak. Mingu was an excellent rider. Everyone had praised her talents since childhood. She was never afraid of falling. I had heard those comparisons countless times. Mingu herself would often smile sweetly and say, "Sister Lila has such delicate skin. Naturally, things are different for her." I once disliked her. I assumed she deliberately tried to show me up. But watching her circle the riding field that day, I noticed something new. Every time she finished a difficult riding maneuver and landed safely, her eyes darted quickly toward the surrounding onlookers. She was checking whether everyone still thought she was impressive. I recognized that small gesture. I had done exactly the same thing in my past life. Then Mingu's horse got spooked. She fell hard to the ground. Everyone rushed toward her. She immediately pushed herself upright. "I am perfectly fine." Sixth brother even laughed. "There." I told everyone Mingu was sturdy. Something heavy sank inside my chest. She took 2 steps forward. Her right foot twisted awkwardly beneath her. "Wait." I stepped forward and stopped her. Mingu smiled. "Truly, I am all right. There is something wrong with your ankle. It is merely a twist. It does not hurt." Those 2 short words sent a cold chill through me. I had spoken those exact words so many times that I walked closer. "Do not keep walking. Fetch a physician at once." Mingu's expression shifted. "Sister Lila, there is really no need. We have so many people watching. It is only a simple sprain. If I endure it." "Why should you endure it?" I looked straight into her eyes. Mingu froze. Everyone around us fell silent. I knelt down and gently touched her swollen ankle. The instant my fingers made contact, her face turned deathly pale. I lifted my head. "This is what it does not hurt looks like." The physician arrived quickly. After examining her injury, his expression turned grave. "The damage is severe. She must not ride horses anytime soon. If she keeps forcing herself to walk or ride, she risks permanent chronic injury." Every trace of color drained from Mingu's face. Sixth brother's laughter vanished. Third brother frowned. "Is the injury really that bad?" The physician nodded. If the young lady had spoken of her pain earlier, she could have avoided so much suffering. All eyes turned toward Mingu. Suddenly she began to cry. Quiet tears streamed down her cheeks. Sixth brother panicked. "Why are you crying? Does it hurt?" She shook her head and cried harder. At last she choked out her words. "I was only afraid everyone would decide I was fragile too." My breath caught in my throat. Sixth brother stood completely motionless. Third brother fell silent. Mingu lowered her head. "Ever since we were small, everyone told me how sensible I was. How I was nothing like Sister Lila." Sister Lila cried. "I would not. She feared cold weather. I did not. She dared not ride fierce horses. I would. If I start admitting things hurt me too, will everyone stop praising me?" I stood beside her. It felt like staring at my old self. A girl who would do absolutely anything to hear others call her sensible. It turned out I had never been alone in this struggle. Mingu looked toward me through her tears. "Truthfully, I envied you sometimes. When you cried as a small child, at least you had 7 brothers there to comfort you." My eyes burned. All those years, I had only ever watched others compare Mingu and me. I had never stopped to think what those constant comparisons did to her. The difference between us was simple. When I lost, I suffered. When she won, she feared she might have to stop winning. When we returned home, grandmother heard about Mingu's twisted ankle. Her first comment was, "How can a young lady be so fragile?" I sat close by. My fingers tightened. In my past life, I would have bowed my head and stayed quiet. This time I lifted my chin. "Grandmother, pain is pain. Admitting you feel it will not bring the Sean family's honor crashing down." The whole hall fell quiet. Grandmother's expression darkened. "Lila, you grow more and more." Sixth brother cut her off all of a sudden. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. There was no trace of amusement on his face. Mingu's injury is genuinely serious. Let her rest and heal properly. Grandmother frowned. Third brother spoke next. He is right. Do not make her walk. Grandmother said no more. A realization washed over me. None of my brothers told me to hold my tongue. The next day, third brother came to the Sioux residence alone. He sat in the garden for a very long time without saying a word. I poured him a cup of tea. What troubles you? He held the teacup in both hands. A long moment passed. Then he spoke. When I was 13 years old, I fell off a horse and broke a rib. I never told you this. I cried from the pain. Our father only said, a son of the Sean family must stand back up on his own. So from that day forward, I stood. No matter how badly something hurt, I would not cry. I listened quietly. I always believed people could push through anything as long as they endured. So whenever you told me you were tired, I told you to hold on a little longer. Whenever you told me you were afraid, I thought you simply needed to try harder until your fear faded away. A bitter little smile tugged at his lips. When Mingu was terrified of being labeled fragile, I finally understood. I kept forcing the only coping method I knew onto all of you. I looked over toward him. He had always been the strictest among my brothers. He was equally hard upon himself. I once thought he simply could not understand me. Now I saw he barely understood his own heart either. Lila, for the ways I hurt you in the past, I offer my apology. I pressed my lips together. I believe you never intended to wound me, but I was hurt all the same. Third brother nodded. He did not demand I forgive him. He only said, I will learn to do better. My nose stung. Learn what? You said it yourself. When something hurts, you ought to say so. I intend to try. I smiled. That is good. Sixth brother's change unfolded more simply. A few days later, one of our elder aunts came to visit Mingu. She spotted me there as well and laughed. Mingu has always been the sensible one. Lila was fragile from childhood. Sixth brother happened to walk in through the doorway. In times past he would have immediately agreed. Exactly. This time he paused. He looked distinctly uncomfortable. Why compare the two of them? Our aunt blinked in surprise. Sixth brother still felt awkward speaking these new kinds of words. He scratched at his nose. Mingu is Mingu. Lila is Lila. Since when does feeling pain mean someone lacks good sense? I stood watching him. Sixth brother grew annoyed. What are you staring at? Sixth brother, you look quite agreeable today. Did I not look agreeable before? Your mouth wasn't. Silence hung thick in the air. Minga burst out laughing. Sixth brother chased us playfully around the room, grumbling the whole time. The household filled with noisy, warm commotion. In that exact moment, a quiet truth dawned on me. A family did not have to be a space where nobody ever made mistakes. It could be a place where people messed up, yet chose to learn to do better afterward. Around this same time, trouble descended on Peregrine's flower nurseries. An unexpected late cold snap swept through the region. Overnight, huge batches of newly transplanted seedlings needed to be moved into insulated warm sheds. I showed up at the nursery early the next morning. I spotted Peregrine at once. He was walking with a noticeable limp, his face drained of all color. Your leg is hurting. No, the answer came far too fast to be believable. Peregrine caught his own slip-up and sighed. Only a little. How much is a little? I can still walk. I had uttered those exact words countless times in my former life. I fixed my gaze on him. I've used that same excuse too. Peregrine had no retort left. I adopted his usual calm, level tone. If something hurts, why keep it to yourself? It's not severe enough to. I've also said that exact line. Peregrine fell completely silent. I laughed softly. You give such sensible advice to everyone else. When it lands on your own shoulders, suddenly you know nothing at all. Old habit. He shifted his weight. I'll try to change it. My words carried a sharp edge of authority before I could catch myself. Then change it. He lifted his eyes toward me, one eyebrow raised. Are you giving me an order? I froze. Without realizing it, I'd slipped into making decisions for another person. I quickly course-corrected. Let me rephrase that. Would you like me to lend you a hand? Peregrine stared at me. Soft wind stirred the loose strands of hair falling across his forehead. He stayed quiet for a long beat, then nodded one step, yes. That single quiet reply made my heart soften. I did not have to be endlessly useful to hold value. Still, being needed by someone I cared for brought a gentle, warm joy that we worked side by side arranging the warm sheds. By the time dawn broke, exhaustion weighed heavy on my bones. I sat down beside a flower rack and drifted off to sleep. That when I opened my eyes again, a thick padded cushion rested behind my back. Peregrine sat several steps away, poring over a thick account ledger. I rubbed my sleepy eyes. Why didn't you wake me? What would be the point of waking you? So you could keep working. The steward and laborers finished all the work already, he added. Oh. Then I noticed the cushion propping up my back. Is this yours? Your leg aches and you gave your cushion to me? He did not lift his gaze from the pages. I'm sitting in a wooden chair. I'm not perched on the cold ground. I hugged the cushion tight and smiled. Peregrine, next time your leg hurts, speak up. He turned a page slowly. We shall see. Neither of us looked directly at one another. Yet the morning sunlight wrapping around everything felt wonderfully warm, that I attempted to recreate Mother's four-season incense formula 17 separate times. On the 18th try, I finally got it right. I did not copy her notes word for word. One rare ingredient could no longer be found anywhere in the capital, so I substituted it with white plum blossoms I had grown myself. That when the incense started to burn, a faint cool fragrance drifted outward first. Bit by bit, a soft sweetness unfurled, just like spring snow melting over blooming branches. I sat in front of the incense burner, and the urge to cry welled up inside me. This time I did not hold my tears back. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I laughed all at once. Chunda stood beside me, her eyes glistening. If Madame were still alive, she would be overjoyed. I nodded. This joy came not because I had made something useful. I loved the craft. That alone was enough. Later that day, Grandmother asked me what I planned to do with this successful incense blend. I wished to open a small incense studio. To make a great fortune? No. Then why? I simply liked making incense. Grandmother studied my face for a long time, then gave her consent. Go ahead then. You will manage all the bookkeeping yourself. If you lose money, you bear the loss entirely. I grinned. I understand. My incense studio occupied a tiny storefront right next to the Sioux family residence. It was not large. I only produced limited batches each day. On opening day, not a single one of my 7 brothers stayed away. Cale reached out for one incense box first. This smells fantastic. I slapped his hand away. You need to pay for that. He stared at me in utter shock. I am your real brother. You would charge your own family. Exactly. Pay up. Put it on my tab. No credit allowed. Cale's eyes went wide with disbelief. Second brother laughed so hard he thumped the wooden counter. Cale, I never thought I would live to witness this day. Cale spun toward him. What are you cackling about? Second brother picked up 2 boxes of incense. I have silver right here. Fourth brother cut in straight away. I'll take 3 boxes. Fifth brother silently pulled silver coins out from his sleeve. Sixth brother complained loudly. Shouldn't blood brothers get a discount? I pretended to consider for a heartbeat. You do get a discount. An extra 10% surcharge. The whole shop burst into loud laughter. Cale chased me round and round the counter, pretending he intended to grab at me. I ran and dodged, laughing freely. Once I would have shrunk away from this kind of boisterous chaos. I feared everyone would find me annoying. Now I ran and laughed without an ounce of embarrassment. Peregrine arrived last of all. He carried a potted white camellia plant. I blinked in surprise. For me? For your shop's opening day. I glanced down at the flowers. These were the same breed as the old ailing camellia from our first meeting, layers upon layers of pure white petals. Did you grow these yourself? The nursery cultivated them. Were they expensive? Not overly so. What does not overly so even mean? Peregrine looked at me, amusement flickering across his face. On your grand opening day, and you are already haggling over costs with me? Old habit. He smiled gently. This one is a gift. I held the flower pot tight in my arms, then spoke out of the blue. Peregrine Jincheng, why are you always so kind to me? He fell quiet. My 7 brothers still made noisy commotion in the back of the shop. Even so, in that moment, I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heartbeat. Peregrine watched me for a long while. Because I have grown fond of you. My breath caught in my throat. His tone stayed calm and steady, as if he had said nothing earth-shaking. I tell you this only so you know my feelings. I do not demand an immediate answer. If you do not return my regard, that is perfectly fine. I shall still come by normally, and buy incense from your shop. I will not, Peregrine. I cut him off softly. For the first time in my life, my mind did not jump to questions like, what do I owe him in return? Or if I reject him, will he be heartbroken? Instead, I asked myself one plain question. Do I like him? Yes. I liked how he always asked what I wanted, rather than deciding things for me. I liked that even when he knew more about camellia care, he would never snatch my pruning shears away. I liked that when his old leg injury flared up, he could be just as stubborn and quiet about pain as I once was. I liked that both of us were slowly learning to admit when we needed other people. So I spoke. Then you may keep liking me. Peregrine stared, completely stunned. What does that mean? I hugged the white camellia pot tighter against my chest. It means I like you too. He stood stone still. Slowly, a warm flush crept up across his cheeks. Seeing Peregrine Jincheng blush felt wonderfully entertaining. That a tremendous crash echoed from the back of the shop. Kale had slammed an incense box hard onto the wooden table. What? I squeezed my eyes shut. I had completely forgotten 7 brothers stood listening behind us. Second brother reacted first. Peregrine Jincheng, what exactly did you just say? Peregrine answered in a composed voice. I have feelings for Lila. Fourth brother gasped sharply. Third brother's expression darkened. Eldest brother slowly rose to his feet. A tingle ran over my scalp. Everyone, hold. Peregrine turned toward me. Would you like me to leave? I froze. All 7 brothers' gazes locked onto me. Suddenly I laughed. No. Peregrine nodded. Then I shall stay. Kale nearly lost his temper entirely. You still refuse to leave? Lila told me I do not need to go, Peregrine replied. I laughed again. Kale grew angrier. Yet in the end they did not throw Peregrine out. Because now when I said no, they understood I meant exactly what I said. The real conflict arrived sooner than I anticipated. My paternal grandmother learned I had lived with my maternal grandparents for nearly a full year, and that I had even opened my own incense studio. She finally lost all patience. She sent word ordering me to return immediately to the Marquis Manor. That I went. Not out of fear, but because this matter needed to be talked through openly. All 7 of my brothers stood inside the main hall. Grandmother sat in the highest seat. When I stepped inside, her expression was rigid and controlled. Finished with your little games at last? I bowed respectfully. Grandmother, I have not been playing games. Her face hardened. Living at the Sioux household, messing around with flowers, and now running a shop. You are a marquis's daughter. What sort of example are you setting? Once, those words would have thrown me into panic. I would have frantically searched my own behavior for where I had gone wrong. Now I sat down calmly. I enjoy this life. Grandmother let out a cold, mocking laugh. Can a person simply do whatever they please merely because they like it? Why cannot I? You are a young woman. You will marry someday. Your manners have grown worse by the day. She twisted toward eldest brother. Joran, I have already had her old courtyard fully prepared. Bring her home tomorrow. Eldest brother automatically began to reply. Tomorrow I will. Then he stopped short. He turned his eyes toward me. Everyone else in the hall fell quiet. Lila, do you wish to come home? Grandmother's face shifted instantly. Something soft stirred deep inside my chest. That single question mattered more than any apology. Eldest brother had always loved to take charge and arrange everything for me. This time, before making any plans, he asked what I wanted. I shook my head. Not right now. Eldest brother nodded. Then you shall not come back. Grandmother slammed her palm hard against the tabletop. Joran, grandmother. I spoke up, and eldest brother fell silent, letting me take the floor. I turned toward my paternal grandmother. The Marquis Manor is my home. Naturally I will come back. I will return for festivals. When father is staying in the capital, I will visit him. But I will also keep living with my maternal grandparents. My incense studio will stay open. I will keep tending mother's old garden. What I study, what clothes I wear, where I travel, who I marry, even whether I marry at all, those choices belong to me. Grandmother's face turned iron gray. Where did this young lady pick up such stubborn opinions? Because this is my own life. Silence filled the great hall. Hidden inside my wide sleeves, my hands trembled. Courage did not mean I felt no fear. It meant feeling fear, and speaking your truth anyway. Grandmother stared daggers at me. The Sioux family has spoiled you rotten. A woman who cannot bear hardship, what kind of future awaits her? I smiled faintly. Grandmother, it is true. I feel cold easily. Pain frightens me. I shed tears. But when I give my word, I keep my promises. I can run my own shop. When a batch of incense turns out badly, I start over from scratch. Being able to endure endless suffering is not the same thing as being capable. Grandmother opened her mouth to argue. Second brother spoke first. She is doing well with her life now. Grandmother shot him a sharp glare. Second brother rubbed the tip of his nose. I mean it. I used to grow annoyed whenever she cried. Looking back, there was never any real reason for my irritation. Third brother added. She does not need to endure every hardship silently. Fourth brother grinned. Grandmother, we cannot pick every hairpin she wears for her for the rest of her days. Fifth brother said nothing. He simply stepped over to stand beside me. Sixth brother chimed in. And she ought not be constantly compared against anyone else. Lila is just Lila. Cale had kept silent all this time. Grandmother turned to him. Cale, you are the one who dotes on her most. Speak some sense. His expression looked terrible. He looked straight at me. Does this mean you no longer need your brothers? My eyes burned with hot tears. That was his deepest fear. I walked toward him. I do need you. He blinked. Truly. Truly. But needing you does not mean I must obey you in every single thing. When I say no, you have to listen to that. Cale's eyes grew wet. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. I understand. At last. Grandmother swung her gaze over to eldest brother. Joran, you indulge her far too much. Eldest brother stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he answered. Grandmother, Lila is not something for me to manage. Tears almost spilled over my eyelids. In my past life, eldest brother's favorite phrases were I will handle it. I will decide this for you. I will arrange everything. He had always believed that counted as protection. At long last he understood. I was not his burden, nor his possession. Grandmother's face remained grim, but she pushed the matter no further. She stood up, leaning heavily on her cane. At the doorway, she paused. Suit yourself. 2 short words. No warmth, no full approval. Yet I smiled. In my past life, I spent years craving to hear someone say you have finally become sensible. In this life, I found suit yourself sounded remarkably wonderful. That night, all 7 brothers crowded into my old courtyard at the Marquis estate. Cale asked, so when will you officially move back here? I looked over at him. Perhaps at New Year. All 7 men shouted in shock. What? I hugged my cat and laughed. I like living with my maternal grandparents. Cale grew cross. Lila, you are frightening me again. He clamped his mouth shut immediately. I laughed harder. When loving people no longer meant living in constant fear of losing their affection. Even quarrels felt light and easy. 1 year later. Every winter, I still felt the cold deeply. The braziers in my rooms burned hotter than anyone else's. My quilt stayed the softest. Grandmother even had 2 pairs of thick warm gloves stitched just for me. Not a single one of my 7 brothers laughed at this anymore. Second brother still occasionally slipped up. Your room is hot enough to steam steamed buns. I would glance at him. He would correct himself in a hurry. Very pleasant. Nice and warm. I would laugh until my sides ached. Truly, they had changed a great deal. Before eldest brother made plans involving me. He now began by asking, is this what you want? Sometimes my answer aligned with his original idea. Sometimes it was completely different. Little by little, he learned to accept both outcomes. Second brother learned to offer sincere apologies, though he still remained hopeless at comforting people. Third brother eventually would call for a physician when his old injuries flared up. The first time he openly said his leg hurt, the whole family fell into stunned silence. Fourth brother always checked my expression before cracking jokes at my expense. For fifth brother's birthday that year, the gift he gave me was no practical item he thought I ought to need. It was a fine set of flower pruning shears I had long admired. Sixth brother never compared Mingu and me again. After Minga's ankle healed, she also stopped forcing herself to push through pain. The first time she admitted she feared riding fierce horses, sixth brother personally sought out a gentle-natured little mare for her. Kale struggled the most with change. He was still clingy. He would show up at my incense studio every few days. One afternoon he rushed inside brimming with excitement. "Lila, come quickly." I did not lift my head from my work. "Where to?" "Come look at horses." "No," I answered. Kale froze. "Why not?" "I am worn out." The instant those words left my mouth, old instinct made me want to pile on explanations. I had blended 2 batches of incense today. I visited the flower nursery this morning. I was not refusing him because I dislike spending time together. All those excuses sat on the tip of my tongue and I swallowed them all down. I simply do not wish to go today. Clear disappointment showed across Kale's face. In my past life, seeing that look would have made me change my mind right away. This time I held firm. He stood there for a while, then sighed. "Very well. I shall ask you tomorrow." "All right." And he really left. I stared toward the doorway. No panic stirred inside my chest. I no longer feared he would never return. I no longer worried he would think I was selfish. I finally understood. Refusing someone's request does not make genuine love vanish. On rainy days, Peregrine's old leg injury still troubled him. He used to hide the pain. One day I asked, "Shall we head over to the flower nursery today?" He answered naturally, "No. My leg hurts." I nodded right away. "Then I shall not go either." He looked up in surprise. "Why will you not go?" "I am fragile." I said it without a trace of shame. The roads grow slippery in rain. I dislike walking on wet ground. Peregrine laughed. "Very well. Neither of us will go." And so we stayed under the sheltered veranda. One of us sorted through account books. The other mixed incense blends. Rain pattered down over the leaves outside. Everything was quiet and peaceful. I realized something clearly. In my past life, I believed a good life meant satisfying every person around me. But a comfortable life could be far simpler. You only needed to allow yourself to say, "It hurts. I am tired. I do not want to. I like this. I need help." And you must not live in terror that others will stop loving you because of these honest words. The day Peregrine planned to formally propose, he came to me first. Not to eldest brother. Not to my father. He stood beneath mother's old camellia tree, which had just burst into full bloom. "Lila, I wish to formally ask your family for your hand in marriage." I looked at him. "And do you want me to accept?" I stayed silent on purpose. Peregrine's ears slowly turned red. I fought hard to hold back my laughter. "What if I say no? Then I shall not press you." His answer was simple. "You are the one who will live this marriage too. It is not only my decision to make." I laughed. "Then you may go make your formal request." "You agree?" "I agree." Peregrine smiled. The next day, the Jincheng household came to pay their formal visit. But before Peregrine could step foot inside the Marquis Manor, my 7 brothers lined up across the gateway, blocking his path completely. I watched from the sheltered side walkway. The scene looked almost identical to 2 years prior, when they had blocked the Su family gates, determined to drag their little sister home. Back then they wanted to bring me back. Now they hated the thought of letting me marry and leave. Kale looked thunderously angry. Second brother clapped a hand onto Peregrine's shoulder. "Think this through carefully." Peregrine looked genuinely confused. Fourth brother added, "Our sister is fragile. She feels cold easily. Pain bothers her. And she has quite a strong will of her own." I narrowed my eyes from behind him. Fourth brother corrected himself instantly.
All fine qualities.
Every single one. Peregrine fought hard to hold back a smile. Finally, eldest brother's gaze settled on me. Lila, are you absolutely certain? I nodded. I am certain. Eldest brother sat silent for a moment, then stepped aside. The rest of the brothers had no choice but to move out of the way too. Kale stood at the very end of the line and refused to budge. I walked over toward him. Seventh brother. His eyes were red. Does this mean you will no longer need your brothers? That familiar, painful question again. His greatest fear. I suddenly remembered that half-finished wrist guard I had left behind in my old drawer when I moved away 2 years before. Later I had finished stitching it. Not to please him, not out of fear he would be upset, but simply because I wanted to give it to him. I went to my old bedchamber, fetched the box and tossed it over to him. Kale caught it. When he lifted the lid and saw the embroidered wrist guard, he froze. I never finished this back then. I completed it later. His fingers brushed across the cloud embroidery patterns. His eyes grew even wetter. Why did you not give this to me sooner? I forgot. Lila. He looked at me, half hurt, half teased. Then he clamped his mouth shut. I smiled at him. Who said I do not want you anymore? You will still always be my seventh brother. But from now on, do not take for granted that I will always come running after you. He held the wrist guard tightly. After a long quiet moment he spoke softly. I understand. I turned around. Peregrine waited for me outside the courtyard gate. Behind me stood my 7 brothers. Eldest brother was already discussing dowry accounts. Second brother was asking what food we would serve for lunch. Fourth brother and sixth brother argued over who would lead the bridal procession. Fifth brother held my cat in his arms. Third brother complained that everyone was making too much noise. Kale still stood there, staring down at the wrist guard in his hands. From far away, Grandmother Sue called out, "Lila, the wind is picking up. Put on an extra layer." I smiled. I know. The spring breeze blew past. It was not cold at all. Yet I still went back to grab my cloak. Because if I felt cold, I could dress warmer. If something hurt, I could say so. If I was tired, I could rest. If I loved flowers, I could grow them. If I wanted to be coddled for a while, I could allow myself that. I could be fragile and still live a full, wonderful life. In my past life, I spent my whole lifetime chasing after my 7 brothers, desperately trying to prove I deserved their love. Given a second chance, I stopped running after them, and later they chased me all the way to my grandparents' home, asking why I did not need them anymore. But the real lesson I learned in this life was never how to stop caring for them. It was this. Never lose yourself. First, I could have 7 brothers. I could have Peregrine. I could have my maternal grandparents. I could have flowers, incense, and so much love. But before all of that, I had myself. A hashtag main story and hashtag extra story 1. The 7 uncles babysit together for the first time 3 years after my marriage. My daughter was born. Her childhood name was Tuanchuan. Even before Tuanchuan drew her first breath, my 7 brothers had bickered for half a year over one single question. Which uncle would be her favorite? Eldest brother believed there was nothing to debate. Seniority decides everything. I am the eldest maternal uncle. Kale laughed coldly right on the spot. She might not even recognize you. Eldest brother frowned. What do you mean by that? You always walk around with that stern scowl on your face. Kale said. Second brother chipped in helpfully. He has a point there. Eldest brother's face turned dark. Then Tuanchuan was born. The first time all 7 men came to visit her, they lined up beside her cradle. Tuanchuan had just finished feeding. Her round dark eyes, like black grapes, stared up at them all. Kale leaned in first. Tuanchuan, I am your 7th uncle. Your mother loved me best when she was little. I sat on the bed and let out a cold laugh. Who told you that? Kale pretended he had not heard me. Tuanchuan stared up at him, and then she smiled. Kale was so proud he almost floated off the ground. Did everyone see that? She likes me. The other 6 brothers' expressions soured instantly. Second brother squeezed forward. Move over. Tuanchuan, second uncle has brought you candy. I stared at him. She has no teeth yet. Second brother froze. I will save it for when she grows teeth. Fourth brother immediately teased. More like you will eat it yourself. Chaos erupted inside the bedchamber. Peregrine stood by the window, arms folded, watching the whole scene unfold. I glanced toward him. Are you not going to step in? He stayed perfectly calm. Why should I? They cannot steal our daughter away. Then he stretched out both hands. To Antoine. The little girl who had just been smiling at Cale instantly twisted her head around. In the next instant, both tiny hands reached out toward her father. Cale's smile vanished completely. Peregrine lifted our daughter into his arms, then looked calmly over toward Cale. There you go. Cale grew so angry he almost stormed off. But he stayed, because to Antoine suddenly sneezed. All 7 brothers crowded around the cradle at once. Is she cold? Is there a draft? Shut the windows. Is there enough charcoal burning? Lila, why is she wearing so little clothing? I fell silent, then glanced over at Peregrine. Does this feel familiar to you? He nodded heavily. I laughed. Brothers. All 7 turned toward me. I asked lazily. Do you think she is being a little fragile? The whole room fell dead silent. Cale reacted first. Nonsense. Second brother frowned. Babies naturally feel cold easily. Third brother added. Truly, newborns have weak bodies. They ought to be carefully protected. Fourth brother declared. Crying is not a sign of being fragile. They cannot speak with words. Fifth brother muttered. She is indeed wearing too little. Sixth brother snapped. Whoever dares compare her to another child will answer to me. Eldest brother finished the list firmly. Nobody is allowed to call to Antoine fragile. I almost laughed out loud. Oh, so now you all understand. 7 brothers stared at me, lost for words. Peregrine's shoulders shook with silent laughter. I glared over at him. If you want to laugh, just laugh out loud. He turned away, but it was already too late. Fourth brother pointed at him. Peregrine Jincheng. Have you been waiting all these years just to laugh at us? Peregrine held our daughter securely in his arms. No. I merely think karma works very swiftly. All 7 brothers surged toward him. Stop fighting. I shouted. Everyone froze. Tuanchuan got startled. Her little mouth trembled and she started crying. The 7 uncles panicked instantly. Why is she crying? Who frightened her? Was 4th brother speaking too loud? Clearly it was 7th brother's fault. What does this have to do with me? Tuanchuan cried louder and louder. In the end, Peregrine was the one who soothed her. The 7 brothers stood all around him, every face more serious than the last. I sat on the bed, and thought the scene felt hauntingly familiar. Perhaps this was how they had once clustered around me long ago. They had forgotten that little girl they used to pick up whenever she cried had only ever been an ordinary child, one who felt pain, and felt fear. Cale leaned toward me suddenly. Lila. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. Were you this noisy when you were small? I smiled sweetly. I do not remember. I have forgotten. Cale clearly did not believe me. I added lazily. The only thing I recall is that after a while, people started saying I was fragile. Cale fell quiet. Then he turned and walked away. Where are you going? I called after him. Shopping. Shopping for what? He gritted his teeth. 70 padded jackets for Tuanchuan. I stared at him. Peregrine finally lost control and laughed out loud. ### extra story 2. Peregrine gets drunk for the first time, and my 7 brothers nearly rejoice. Peregrine had an extremely low tolerance for alcohol. No one knew this before our marriage, because he was a man of great self-awareness. He knew he could not hold his liquor, so he avoided drinking whenever possible. Then eldest brother's birthday arrived. All 7 brothers gathered together. I still do not know which of them first came up with the wicked idea, but they took turns proposing toasts toward Peregrine. By the time I noticed what was happening, it was already too late. Peregrine sat at the banquet table. He looked almost exactly as he did when sober. His gaze remained clear. Only his ears burned bright red. I walked over. How much wine have you drunk? He looked toward me. Not much. Cale immediately reported. 6 cups. I shot Cale a sharp look. You did this on purpose. He wore an innocent expression. How could we? 4th brother added. Our brother-in-law rarely drinks with us. We are only happy. I laughed dryly, as if I believed that lie. I held out my hand. Come on. It is time to go home. Peregrine immediately stood up, completely obedient. I blinked in surprise. Normally, if I said come on, he would at least ask where we were going. Today he had not asked a single question. Suspicion crept over me. Peregrine Jincheng. Are you drunk? No, he sounded utterly convinced. Truly? Truly. Then he turned toward my 7 brothers and announced with complete solemnity, I am taking Lila home. Kale objected at once. But this is already her home. Peregrine nodded. That is true. Then I shall go home with her to her home. Kale stared blankly. 4th brother had already collapsed across the table, roaring with laughter. Now I was fully certain. He was absolutely drunk. Sober Peregrine would never speak in such circular loops that I tugged at his sleeve. Let us leave. He looked down at my hand wrapped around his wrist and stopped moving. What is wrong? I asked Delilah. Do you like me? The whole great hall fell dead silent. Heat rushed up into my cheeks. You are drunk. I know. If you know you are drunk, why ask such a question? Because when I am sober, I am far too embarrassed to ask. My 7 brothers fell quiet. I too was stunned. This was the first time I learned how brutally honest Peregrine became after drinking. Kale sneered. You know how to feel embarrassment. Peregrine turned toward him, deadly serious. Yes. The first time I came to your manor to formally propose marriage, I was very nervous. All 7 brothers grew curious. 2nd brother asked, were you afraid we would refuse your suit? No. Then what frightened you? Peregrine pointed straight at me. That she might change her mind. I had been trying to drag him away. My hand slowed. Kale looked displeased. If she changed her mind, that would be wonderful news. Peregrine looked him dead in the eye. You are wrong. Lila likes me. He said it with such maddening certainty that Kale laughed in disbelief. Who told you that? Peregrine pointed toward me once more. She did. 7 pairs of eyes all locked onto my face. My head ached. Yes. I told him that. Kale clutched at his chest. Little sister, there was no need to confirm that in front of everyone. I ignored him. Drunk Peregrine clearly intended to lay bare every thought in his head. He turned toward eldest brother. Eldest brother. Eldest brother's expression turned complicated. Who are you calling that? You. Silence filled the room. Lila calls you eldest brother. Therefore I shall also call you eldest brother. For once, even eldest brother had no reply. 2nd brother struggled hard not to laugh. Peregrine kept speaking. Eldest brother. Thank you. Eldest brother paused. Thank me for what? For finally learning to ask Lila what she wants, before making choices for her. The banquet hall went quiet. I froze too. Peregrine's vision was already slightly blurred from wine, yet his words remained crystal clear. I did not like you very much before. All 7 brothers' expressions darkened at once. I immediately pulled his arm. That is quite enough. He refused to move. But I like you a little better now. 4th brother's mouth twitched. Ought we to thank you for this great honor? Peregrine thought about it seriously. No need. 4th brother stared at him. I was nearly dying of laughter. At last, Peregrine turned toward Kale. Kale visibly tensed up. What do you want now? Peregrine walked over and patted his shoulder. You are not entirely bad either. Kale's face darkened. Take your hand off my shoulder. Peregrine would not. Instead he leaned closer. But you cling to Lila far too much. You ought to work on that. Kale exploded. Peregrine Jincheng. I hurried over and dragged Peregrine backward. Stop talking now. Peregrine fell quiet instantly, obedient as a small child. My 7 brothers sat collectively stunned. Kale pointed. Why does he listen to her so well? I glanced at the drunk man beside me. Because he listens to me even when he is sober. Kale looked even more traumatized.
Impossible.
I ignored him. Eventually, I got Peregrine into our carriage. He leaned against the carriage wall, eyes half closed. I poked his arm. Will you drink with them again? No. Why not? They are bad people. I burst out laughing. Will you dare say that to their faces when you are sober tomorrow? Peregrine opened his eyes and looked straight at me. Yes. The next morning he woke up. I repeated every single word he had said the night before. Peregrine stayed silent for a full quarter-hour. I smiled sweetly. Still dare? He turned quickly away. There is work waiting for me at the flower nursery. I grabbed his sleeve. Peregrine Jincheng, why are you running away? I am not running away. Then why are your ears bright red? At last he turned back to face me, his face completely blank. Lila, sometimes people ought to be allowed to forget things. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Extra story 3. My 7 brothers discover that my son is not delicate at all when Tuanchuan turned 4 years old. I gave birth to a son. His childhood name was Yuanbao. Kale picked that name for a terribly vulgar reason. He said, "Your incense studio earns silver, so your son ought to be called Yumba Little Gold Ingot." I originally refused the name, but Kale called the boy Yuanbao every single day. Before long, the whole family had grown used to it. Yuanbao was completely different from Tuanchuan. Tuanchuan feared cold, feared bugs. If she fell over, she might cry for half an hour. From the moment Yuanbao learned how to walk, he could tumble 8 times in a single day. Every time he fell, he would scramble back up by himself and go dashing forward once more. At first, the 7 uncles were overjoyed. 3rd brother especially. He held Yuanbao in his arms and sighed with deep satisfaction. This child takes after the Shan family. I sipped my tea and looked over at him. 3rd brother hastily added, I mean, he is full of energy. I am not saying he ought to endure pain silently. I nodded in satisfaction. Once Yuanbao turned 3, the brothers began fighting over who would teach him things. Eldest brother taught him to read characters. 3rd brother showed him basic martial stances. 6th brother taught him to ride a tiny pony. Kale was the worst. He taught the little boy how to climb walls. By the time I found out, Yuanbao was already standing beneath the old wall at my maternal grandparents' estate, staring upward toward Kale. Uncle, can I really climb this? Of course you can. Kale crouched down. Your mother never dared climb walls when she was small. I stood right behind him, my expression deceptively gentle. 7th brother. Kale's whole body slowly stiffened. He turned around. Lila, when did you get here? Right from the moment you said I never dared climb walls. Kale rushed to correct himself. You were not afraid. You simply thought wall climbing was beneath your dignity. I laughed without warmth. Meanwhile, Yuanbao had already begun scrambling up the wall. I did not stop him. If he wanted to try, he ought to be allowed. His first foothold slipped. Thump. He landed hard on his bottom. Kale's face turned white. Yuanbao. He rushed over. Does it hurt? Yuanbao shook his head. No. Kale relaxed visibly. See, boys are just. My expression shifted in an instant. Kale cut his own sentence short. Yuanbao was already preparing to stand up again. I knelt down beside him. Does it truly not hurt at all? He blinked. He looked at me, then looked at Kale. At last he whispered, my bottom hurts a little. I nodded. Then rub it. Yuanbao immediately patted his own behind. Done. And he went right back to trying to climb the wall. Kale stood nearby, a complicated look on his face. What is wrong? I asked. He rubbed his nose. Nothing. I just suddenly think it was a good thing you asked one more time. I smiled and said nothing. Later on, Yuanbao truly mastered wall climbing. And disaster followed close behind. Unlike Tuanchuan, he needed no one to egg him on into adventures. If he wanted to go somewhere, he would just go. On day 1, he climbed into grandfather's vegetable garden and pulled up 3 radishes. On day 2, he scrambled over into the neighboring courtyard and came back carrying a live chicken. On day 3, his head popped up over the Marquis Manor's wall. He frightened my paternal grandmother so badly, she nearly threw her teacup. Kale finally realized there was a real problem. He carried Yuanbao back and gave him a serious scolding. Do not climb random walls anymore. Yuanbao looked terribly wronged. But uncle taught me. Kale fell completely silent. The whole family stared at him. I sat nearby drinking tea, perfectly calm. Eldest brother asked coldly, did you teach him to climb walls? Kale tried to defend himself. I only demonstrated once. Fourth brother immediately cut in. I can testify at least 5 times. Kale glared. Whose side are you on? Fourth brother laughed until he nearly fell over. Yuanbao kept reporting every misdeed. Uncle said, a man falls down and gets back up. Third brother's expression changed. That phrase sounded painfully familiar. Kale hurried to explain. I never told him he must not cry. I swear I never did. I set down my teacup. Nobody accused you of that. Kale grew even more nervous. Lila, I have truly changed. If something hurts, I absolutely let him speak up. Yuanbao suddenly raised his little hand. Mother. Yes. I hurt now. Kale instantly crouched down. Where? Yuanbao held his stomach. I am hungry. Everyone stared. I burst out laughing. Kale grew furious. He lifted his hand as if he intended to swat Yuanbao's bottom and his hand froze halfway in the air. Then he turned toward me. Am I allowed to spank him once? Il left hata. Why are you asking me? Ask him. Kale turned toward Yuanbao. Can uncle spank you? Yuanbao shook his head hard. No, why not? I am fragile. The whole room fell dead silent. Then Tuanchuan laughed so hard she slid right off her chair. Fourth brother slapped the table. Second brother laughed until he started coughing. Even eldest brother turned his face away to hide his amusement. Kale stood in the center of the room, speechless with rage. I leaned against Peregrine's shoulder, tears streaming down my face from laughter. Peregrine was laughing too. Only Kale pointed at Yuanbao after a long struggle. Who taught you that phrase? Yuanbao pointed straight toward me without hesitation. Mother. Kale looked over at me. I lifted my chin. What? Is there something wrong with being fragile? Kale opened his mouth then surrendered. No. It is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yuanbao immediately threw himself at him. Uncle, I am hungry. Kale picked him up. Come. Uncle will buy you food. Tuanchuan immediately chased after them. I want some too. Kale turned around. Everyone is coming. Sixth brother shouted. Why should only they go with seventh uncle? Second brother stood up. I have money. Fourth brother said. I know the best eating house around. The 7 brothers began arguing as they headed toward the doorway. The 2 children were squished in the middle, both looking utterly delighted. I stood in the doorway watching them go. Peregrine walked over to stand beside me. You are not going to step in? I shook my head. No. Will they not spoil the children terribly? I glanced sideways at him. You are starting to sound more and more like eldest brother. Peregrine quickly corrected himself. Forget I said that. I laughed. Outside the courtyard, the 7 uncles were still bickering. Suddenly Tuanchuan shouted toward us. Mother, can we come home late tonight? Called back. Why? The uncles are taking us to eat lots of delicious food. Before I could reply, Kale's voice boomed. Lila, the children asked to go by themselves. We are not making decisions for them. My shoulders shook with laughter. I hear you. Go on. A cheer went up, and the crowd vanished into the distance. Peregrine stood beside me for a moment, then sighed. They really have improved. I nodded. They have. Only one thing has not changed. What is that? I smiled, gazing toward the distant figures of 7 brothers arguing over 2 small children. They are still terribly noisy.